Hi, if you're new here, I'm watching Dragon Ball Daima in the dub version, and I'm trying to get caught up because of all the spoilers that I've seen from the Japanese version. Another episode of Daima. At this point, the series has settled into a rhythm. Some light exposition to remind you what the hell's going on, a handful of jokes that are just charming enough to avoid being irritating, and a general vibe that can best be described as Dungeons & Dragons campaign, but written by a guy who only owns Dragon Quest art books. This week is no different. While Goku and the gang are trudging toward the Demon King's castle, stumbling into what's essentially a tourist brochure for the Demon Realm's shittiest travel routes, there's nothing particularly earth-shattering happening. No big revelations, no planet-shattering punches, just a steady trickle of quirky nonsense that's designed to keep you entertained long enough to forget that none of this actually matters yet. Still, credit where it's due, Daima has found a way to make plot stalling feel less like a chore and more like a fun road trip. This time, the plot device screwing everyone over is transportation. Their ship's been stolen, so they have to hoof it. Which prompts Goku to ask the obvious question, why not just fly there? It's a valid question, and the answer is essentially because the writers said so. Apparently, the Demon Realm's air pressure is so oppressive that flying is like trying to sprint through wet cement. It's a cute world-building detail, but let's not kid ourselves. This is 100% a narrative speed bump to stop Goku from cheesing his way to the finish line. And sure, purists will whine about how nerfing Goku is sacrilege, but honestly, forcing the characters to actually do stuff instead of just screaming themselves stronger is a nice return to form for Dragon Ball. For those of you still clinging to the good old days of power levels and who can beat who playground arguments, we do get a little taste of that. Our old friend Glorio, whose name sounds like a rejected name for an antidepressant, gets to flex by saving Goku and Supreme Kai from getting turned into monster hors d'oeuvres. Goku pegs him roughly as Supreme Kai tier. Speaking of old glory hole here, the show's clearly keeping him in the vaguely suspicious category. His helpful attitude feels about as sincere as a phishing email. There's an unsettling, helpful stranger with an agenda vibe radiating off him. But hey, plot intrigue aside, the real joy here is the Demon Realm itself, which continues to feel like the writers cracked open a moldy JRPG guidebook and started ripping pages out at random. We're talking potions with floating eyeballs, utility insects that can replenish stamina or trigger fusions, and a giant seed that works as a rocket-powered travel pod. It's also aggressively weird that you have to admire the commitment. Speaking of the fusion bug, if you're familiar with the old Chekhov's gun trope, the writing rule that says if you show the audience a gun in Act 1, it has to go off by Act 3, it feels pretty inevitable that this little critter is going to come into play later. It's the kind of item you don't casually introduce unless you plan to pull out a dramatic moment, with some absurd twist that only Dragon Ball could pull off. That said, I haven't actually seen any spoilers about a new fusion, or any fusion at all occurring in this series. You'd think the news of a brand new fusion would have been shoved into my eye line at some point when I'm on the internet, given the spoilers that I've already been exposed to. Maybe the spoiler gremlins have decided to take mercy on me. Or maybe it's just another weird Demon Realm oddity that we'll never see again. Either way, I'm keeping my eye on it because you don't casually drop a new way to fuse two characters together unless you're planning on using it. All this detouring eventually funnels into a good old-fashioned oppressed village side quest, a staple so ingrained in RPGs that I half expected a floating exclamation point above someone's head. This time, the locals are being harassed by King Goma's personal rent-a-cops, the gendarmerie? Gendarmerie? Sounds like either perfume or a fascist fashion brand. Their main gimmick? A machine that literally sucks years off your life. We also get a proper fight scene out of all of this, with Goku busting out some of his old martial arts gymnastics. The power pulls back too, and it's actually useful. He's swinging, blocking, and generally showing off in a way that makes you remember why the physicality of OG Dragon Ball used to be fun, before it all just became laser beams and teleporting. Which I also love, but for different reasons. As all this drips along, we do at least meet another new face, and it's the girl from the intro. There's not much time to get a read on her yet, but she seems fine. Hopefully she's more than just another piece of luggage on this increasingly crowded road trip. Honestly, the more time I spend in this world, the more I find myself wishing Daima was a Chrono Trigger style RPG instead of a series. Something about wandering through the Demon Realm's weird little villages, rifling through shelves for potions with questionable side effects, and getting dragged into side quests by bug-eyed locals feels tailor-made for that comforting loop of random battles and overwrought dialogue boxes. All in all, this episode's a bit of a setup, a lot of scene dressing, and just enough action to stop you from checking your phone. At least, for me, I know a lot of people have issue with that. It's not breaking new ground, but it's charming enough to get away with it. More importantly, Daima still feels like it actually knows what kind of show it wants to be, unlike Dragon Ball GT. That's me done ranting for now. If you've got thoughts, drop them below. If you've got complaints, write them on a piece of paper and gently feed them to your nearest trash can.